Greetings, this is episode 11 of my Oddcast, and today we'll be kicking off the guitar project. So, the thing that I like the least about constructing a new guitar is wiring it at the end of the process. And the reason I dislike it is it involves soldering, which is not of itself that much fun, in a confined space, which makes it worse, near to a finished guitar, which will be damaged if you touch it with the soldering iron, if any solder BBs splash onto it. And overall, it's one of it is the most stressful part because it's technically quite difficult. There's great risk of damaging something, and if you do screw up in a way that damages the guitar body, is literally the last process. So you have to restart from the very beginning and do everything again. It's when the stakes are highest, and it's a ill-timed place to put a difficult process. So what I want to explore in this R&D project is what can we do to make that less stressy, perhaps faster, perhaps more accurate, perhaps better for other stakeholders in the guitar world, as well as the manufacturer of small-scale manufacturer, which is what I would very much count myself as. So some of the things I anticipate being worth looking at, although I don't want to say this is a complete list, this is just what's obvious from at the point I'm doing this kickoff meeting. It's obvious that we should consider having pre-wired circuit boards rather than doing the wiring inside the guitar. It's obvious, I think, that we could use some kind of connector to connect wires rather than actually soldering wires inside the guitar. I think it's worthwhile to explore, could we use surface mount components instead of these capacitors with legs on? It's, I think, worthwhile to explore to what extent we can reduce the amount of individual SKUs we're dealing with, to what extent we can make things modifiable by the end user. Like, can we make it easier for guitarists to experiment with different tone capacitors, for example? Can we make it easier for retailers to fix issues that a customer has discovered with the electronics in their guitar? Can we potentially make a guitar that ships to a retailer without the electronics decided for it, and have the retailer combine it with an electronics package at the stage of selling it, so that they can customize it to what they believe their local market desires, or what's fashionable kind of music at that time, or even to the specific requirements of an individual customer. Let's see if any of those things or all of those things are possible, to what extent they're possible and reasonable to think of actually doing. And that's what I want to explore with this project. Now, let's get on to how we're going to evaluate solutions, because highly unlikely that we're going to find in any R&D project a solution that we think is unmitigatedly perfect for every possible use case. So let's say that we want to avoid, what do we want to avoid? We want to avoid doing anything that only makes sense to do if we end up selling hundreds of thousands, or thousands, or even only hundreds of instruments. We want this to be a practical thing to do at a very small scale. We also want it not to become cost prohibitive if you did want to scale it up to units a year if the business grows like that, or if another company who is already a high volume guitar producer wants to adopt these techniques, I would like it to be possible for them to do so. Because ultimately, if it's more adopted in the industry, it's more likely, whatever it is, that will be useful to me. Part of that is going to be, it's got to meet the quality requirements of a low volume, expensive, frankly, but high quality as the pitch guitar producer. But it also means we would like it to be viable at reduced cost and commensurately or even disproportionately reduced quality. But I would like it to be something that could be done in a $300 branded guitar, something like think an Epiphone or a Squier, but I don't obviously have any control over those brands. We want, to the extent possible, not to restrict end users' ability to change pickups. So it's got to work with 2 and 4 conductor humbuckers, which is really 3 and 5 when you add on the extra wire. It's got to work with single coils and tapped single coils. It's got to work with Jazzmaster style pickups, dog ear P90s. It should work with things like single Duncan P rails, which have a split personality on the humbucker. That should work sensibly. If it works with bass pickups, that's a bonus. I would like it not to. I don't want to exclude using active pickups. I don't want to exclude using passive pickups and active EQ. I don't want to. I certainly want it to be possible. It must be possible to build a normal passive guitar wired to a normal phone output jack, so that your vintage fuzzes and so forth can still work. But I feel it should also be possible to have active pickups, active EQ, and the output be, sufficiently go through some kind of embedded amp modeler to a headphone socket, so that home practice can be pleasant. Like that's what perfection would look like if it met all of those requirements. Now, it's not likely, as I said earlier, that any solution can possibly meet all of those requirements. So let's just say that investigate the options that are out there, report back on at least those dimensions. The other thing that is very important, like the visual style of the guitar, it should be possible. Ideally, you want that to be orthogonal to the technique that's used here. So we don't want to constrain the visual style of the guitar or the overall shape of the guitar by whatever solution we arrive at. And so let's say what we want to do is investigate the options that are out there. Let's say report on all of those dimensions and anything else that you think is interestingly deviant from the nature of an electric guitar, like if it constrains things in some way, or if it opens up a new avenue of exploration in some way. Those things are worth mentioning in the report, and we'll reconvene at the point where we feel we've explored everything it's reasonable to explore that we can see, and we'll evaluate all of the options at that point. So that's the shape of this project. The next video on this project will be going deep into one of the possible solutions, and I do not yet know which one I'm going to want to do first. Finally, in episode 9, I promised in episode 11 that I would tell you what the episode numbers 2, 6, and so forth are reserved for. Those are going to be used, if they're ever used, for collaboration content of some kind or another. So whether I have a guest on one of my podcasts or I'm a guest on someone else's podcast, those will be episodes, from my point of view, episodes 2, 6, and so forth. And the notional name for that series is Phil's Outcast, being a portmanteau of outreach and podcast. But as I say, it has not happened yet. It may never happen. Thank you for attending my kickoff meeting, and have a great week. The next video will be kickoff meeting for the C++ project.